Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio. Live from the heart of the downtown east side, it's Talk Recovery Radio with Giuseppe Ganci and Darren Gaylor on Vancouver's Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. From the streets to the studio, bringing you addiction recovery stories from real people with lived experience and real experts on today's issues. Tune in live every Thursday, noon to 1. Powered by New West Recovery. Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio.
And good afternoon, Vancouver. Hello, hello. This is Giuseppe Ganci, and I'm in studio with Mr. Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren, how's it going?
Excellent. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm keeping myself
big week.
Yes, there's our new updated shot there with Mr. Tom Cochran on the stage. A pretty full crowd. Thanks for everybody for attending. What a day, eh?
It was amazing. Another amazing year.
Another amazing year, yeah. So Darren was the MC. Thank you very much for being there all day long and keeping the stage going. And did you notice anything different this year? How was your experience?
I mean, it seems like every year our footprint becomes a little bit bigger, and so we're always in a different, place in the street. So to snapshot the memory from the year before to see, is this a larger crowd? By how much? I mean, it did feel like it was as big, if not bigger. But it's just so hard to tell as the recovery day, block festival gets bigger and bigger. Yeah. No, I mean, I still felt the vibe of like people that have been coming every year to people there for the first time to members in residents in the community just coming to check it out and see what it's all about. Like, that hope that you do get people that want to just see what's going on, stopping by, bringing lawn chairs,
Mm-hmm.
and going, these are people in recovery. These are like this is what addicts and junkies and crackheads and alcoholics, create. Amazing.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point of it. Yeah, just to get that spark of a conversation, just that spark of a conversation. And it's important, a friend of mine just died of an overdose 2 days ago. And, I remember, having a conversation with him because he would help out with our Pride events. And he asked me not to tag him because of his job. He didn't want his employer to know that he was in recovery. And I was just like, well, they know that you're gay. You know what I mean? Like, what's wrong with them knowing that you're in recovery? And we have a lot of work to do. Work to do,
because and that's not just, something that he should work through. Like that's in some areas, like in the corporate fields, that's a thing. That's a judgment. That's can this person actually be given these types of responsibilities and roles? Because now that I know they have this history, right? I mean, yeah, it's something definitely needs to be addressed.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we're estimating about 60,000 people showed up at Recovery Day, and it was just, every stage was just packed. We had, 2 main stages this year, one for the kids, one for the grown-ups. And I think the both grown-ups and kids enjoyed both stages. So it was quite phenomenal. And can't stress volunteers, like, wow, like literally just like Darren started off, like just a bunch of people that showed up to rehab, got clean and sober, like put on a major event. Yeah. Like this was no potluck, like this was like major. And
how many, what's the volunteer number to even just be able to put this through?
there's about 220 volunteers throughout the whole day from beginning
Right.
to end. And,
And
you
that's
know, they would,
including us.
yeah, that's like just, you know, how many people involved in it actually happening and stuff like that. So it was pretty amazing, and everybody did a stellar job, you know, everybody did. So it's pretty amazing. And
Uh,
huge shout out to the city of New West for letting us do it.
Totally,
Not
right?
too many cities would be like, hey, we're a bunch of drug addicts and we organize a big street festival on your streets.
Yeah.
Close all these, you know, they just, you know, we laugh about it, but it's like, yeah, that's what happened. And, you know, it's not a lot of cities are doing this, and I don't understand, you know, how we can transcend this. Like, unfortunately, Recovery Day Calgary just got canceled. It was supposed to happen on the weekend. Recovery Day Winnipeg, they had one, so that's awesome. But you know, Toronto still doesn't have a Recovery Day. So if you're watching or you're listening, like, you know, give me a call. I'm more than happy to help you out and give you some pointers and how we did it.
Yeah, I thought it was. I'll just share a cool little story, because my 7-year-old goes to a community school, you know, near our place, right? And I've been chatting with the principal for quite some time. Like, you know, he's a really down to earth young guy, like younger than you would assume most principals to be, and you know, he seems very genuine in wanting to help, you know, families that, you know, have barriers and situations going on at home, you know, whether it's addiction or mental health, or, you know, their kids need extra support. And, you know, I just, in passing, it was always like, hey, you know, if you ever need anything, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I have a history, like, you know, and I've, you know, been open. And I bumped into him at Recovery Day because he lives in New Westminster. And he's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, I'm not only emceeing, but I'm a person in recovery. Like, I've been doing this for 10 years, like 10 plus years. Right. And he was like, really? He's like, what a small world. He said, you know, I've been coming to this, you know, for the last few years, and just wanted to check it out. And there's such a cool energy. And we started talking about, you know, he's like the amount of resources that, you know, he would benefit from. And, you know, like, obviously working within a school district, he's set by certain, you know, codes and conducts of what he can use for resources. But you know, he was like, this is fantastic. He said, you know, he said, we need this in Poco and we need this in other communities. And I was just like, yes, yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool, you know. And well, just that whole notion, right? Like, you touched on it a bit with your friend in his workplace, and just, you know, that there are people in the community that are our principals, our teachers, are, you know what I mean? You know, that are hoping that people like us are willing to have the conversation of our own history, so that, you know what I mean, it can then create that dialogue, and you know, ask for help. Because, you know, people that I've known throughout the years and networks, and, you know, youth counselors and all of that are all information that you know, can be passed along, right, to somebody who's reaching out and saying, hey, do you know somebody?
Never too early, never too late to talk about addiction, mental health at the dinner table. So that's one thing that, you know, I kind of want to make it the theme for next year, because there's so many recovery allies and people that were just there curious. It's like, do you talk about it at the dinner table? Like, hey, you know, what is recovery? So we'll talk more about Recovery Day at the end of the show. We've got somebody waiting in the waiting room to share their conversation about recovery with us. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio, whether you're listening to us on the radio, Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5, shout out to them. Or if you're replaying us on your favorite restream, YouTube, click follow, subscribe, actually subscribe on YouTube, and just thanks for listening to us. And, you know, give us a like and share on Facebook as well. So you can replay all of our past shows at talkrecoveryradio.com. 8 years of shows and hundreds of guests, thousands of listeners. And shout out to Jordan, who books our guests. So if you're interested in being on the show, you can email jordan@lastdoor.org. You can give him a call, an email, always looking for personal stories, always looking for who's got the latest book and information about finding recovery. So Darren, who do we get to talk recovery with today?
Yes, we are talking recovery with Wendy Friesen. She is a speaker, author, does corporate training, a worldwide leader in creating rapid change for life's difficult problems. And since 1994, her site, Wendy.com, has influenced the lives of millions worldwide. She's created over 300 programs on audio and video. She's been called a miracle worker and is now on a mission to change the way the world treats addiction. Fantastic. Welcome to the show, Wendy.
Hi, Darren. So good to meet you here.
It's excellent to have you and nice to meet you. I just want to say Wendy.com. This is still active since 1994.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that's Wendy, WENDI.com.
Right.
So
yeah.
check that out. Okay, I mean, like, where do we start? You train therapists, counselors. This is something that you do not only in hypnotherapy, but is that your main sort of mode of therapy?
Yeah, it is. That and NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which goes along with how we access information in our brain, what triggers us, and how we release old memories or patterns or habits, things like that. So yeah, I started working on the addiction work, even though I thought, well, I'm not qualified to help with addiction. That's something that you have to have all these credentials and be, be so well trained. But my son was having problems with addiction and I decided to help him. And then my first client that came to me for addiction was a meth addict and had been for years. And I thought, oh my God, I can't possibly do that. But I did. I worked with him for about 3 or 4 weeks and he quit doing meth. He got his family back and his life was good. And 6 months later, he walked into my office with a yellow silk rose, which I still have, and said, I've been clean for 6 months. I'm back with my family. My life is great. And I was stunned. So from there, I started doing more creation of what it is that's going to help people with addiction using hypnotherapy.
Right. And I mean, this is, from the layman, let's say, back, especially in 1994, forgive me, but hypnotherapy was you hired for a corporate event, you made one of your coworkers look like a fool, and then I remember hearing things of like, the odd person had quit smoking, there was that sort of thing going on. Now it was, or even still, not really considered, viable treatment, professional sort of, modality, like you say, in addiction field. So, but you are, in the medical, field, working along with doctors. So how has hypnosis changed from, say, 1994, like the legitimacy or the use of it in all fields?
Yeah. And well, what you just made me think about was when I went to my first conference, there was only one conference for hypnotherapy. And it was a bunch of like fat old men, kind of watch swingers. And I just felt like, God, this is not my tribe. What am I doing? These are not people, they are smokers. They're fat. They don't work out. They've got horrible bad habits. And yet they're the hypnotists that are supposed to be helping us.
Hypocritical hypnotists.
Yeah. From there, the profession just changed so rapidly. A lot of very young and brilliant people got into the profession. And now there's just an amazing mass of educated people who we're lay people, but we are professionals and we do a lot of research and we share information and we have gotten amazing results. Hypnotherapists have helped people get over issues that are medical things that the doctors have said, no, there's no way you can do that. Physical problems that you have, amazing, miraculous things that we wouldn't even expect to have happen. But it's an amazing profession to be in. I am so grateful that I get to do this.
I mean,
So Darren, I just want to get an idea though, like let's go right down to bare basics. So what is hypnosis? Like what is it? Because the only experience I have with a hypnotist is at a bar drinking and people doing funny stuff up on stage. I think I participated, but I don't remember because I was drunk. And mind you, I do now a show called Talk Recovery because I can't remember. So is it all the same thing kind of, or like what's going on here? What is
Yeah,
it?
a stage show is very different than what we do in hypnotherapy. So I've done stage shows and it's very well engineered to get the participants to react and do the things I want them to do. And so that has a little bit of, very planned and precise things that are going to make you do that. In hypnotherapy, we're utilizing tools that have been well researched on how the brain works, on how we change thought patterns and how we release old traumas or memories. And especially when it comes to addiction, working with these same tools, I would have a person in my office, they're relaxed, they close their eyes, they're breathing, getting all the tension out of their body, only focusing on my voice. And when we get to that point, their mind becomes very open. And what we call the subconscious mind is often ready to create something new. So if we do talk therapy with someone and it's about addiction or anything else, we're just talking about the problem and we're re-energizing all of the issues and the emotions and the difficulties of it. And we're really not making a lot of progress. So in hypnotherapy, when I have you in this relaxed state, I might take you into the future and say, okay, I want you just to travel on this timeline into the future. Just notice you're going days and weeks and months into the future and go all the way to 1 year in the future. Let your feet touch down and just notice what's changed. And what is the best thing about your life now? What does it feel like to be free from the addiction you used to have in the past? What are you most proud of? Okay, of course, I would do this very slowly and have them answer. What we're doing is building a memory that the mind will believe is just as real as any memory, but we're putting emotions in there and visuals and the beliefs about yourself. And then we bring all of that back into your present state. And there's a little more to it, but this is just one example. When you build a memory, even though it hasn't happened yet, your subconscious doesn't care. Now it draws all of that information into your present state. And it's weird with the addiction stuff. Like there's one of the clients I had that he just wanted to use my recorded program for addiction. And so he got in touch with me like a month later and said, this is ridiculous. I went into the future and I'm an athlete in the future. I'm this high level athlete. He says, I'm a fat slob drunk. That's all I've ever been. I drink over a case of beer a day, or was it a day? It was a lot.
Yeah.
And then he says, but the strangest thing has happened. It's been a week since I guess I quit drinking because I opened my fridge and there's a case of beer in there and it's just been sitting there and I didn't even realize it was there. And he went from that to nothing, but he then became an Ironman. He travels the world going to Ironman competitions now.
Wow.
Because of what happened in that future. Isn't that stunning?
That is pretty amazing.
I mean, it makes sense. I'm one that completely vouches for the fact that you can only talk about the problem for so long until you're creating more misery and an emotional attachment to past memories and guilt and shame. And recovery requires inspiration, hope, a belief that something I can't see myself becoming right now is a reality, right?
Yeah, that it's even possible.
That is possible, exactly. So what is the difference, let's say, between what you just described in hypnotherapy and a visual guided meditation? Where you're you're conscious. And another question is while hypnotized, are you unconscious? And like what state of mind is someone in under hypnosis?
Yeah, and that is a great question because it is so mysterious. And I know when I have a client that's actually in that state of trance, and when they're there, I might lift their arm up and make sure their body's loose and limp and relaxed. And I might ask them some questions. But what I can notice is if they're kind of animated, even though they're relaxed, if their head's moving around or their arms are moving, they're not in that state. So it's just a very deeply relaxed state where you're no longer using all your cognitive conscious function. And when you say, when you're unconscious, well, we're not actually unconscious, but we just call it being in that trance state where we're going to open your subconscious mind. We want you to get those judgments out of the way and the beliefs out of the way that are the thing that your conscious mind has embedded. And for me, what I've learned from my son when he went to many rehabs, and I paid a lot of money to do that, and he was brilliant, but he would say, Mom, what they're doing is terrible. They tell you la, 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 and then you're supposed to not drink. Well, when I studied into it further, knowing that you're believing that you're an alcoholic for life, that even if you don't drink, you're still a dry drunk. And they have you implanting all these beliefs about your future and of who you are, that you do have a disease that you'll never get over. And you're always on the verge of relapse, always. And you can't hang out with normies when in fact, my clients seem to be absolutely fine being around alcohol. This woman stopped me in the grocery store in California and said, oh my God, Wendy, I have to tell you what happened. I used your program. And now when I go down the alcohol aisle in the grocery store, I want to dance. I feel so good because it has no effect on me. So this is what we're wanting to achieve, is that you have the opposite reaction. Another really good example is a woman who used the recorded program. And she said, I was sitting at the bar at a hotel because I was at a conference drinking my club soda. And my friend sat down. She didn't know that I hadn't been drinking for over a month. So she bought me my favorite whiskey in the glass and put it under my nose. So, and that olfactory memory thing, that is really powerful, right? So that should have triggered her to just like, oh, I'm drinking that. But she says, what I felt when I smelled that whiskey is I knew that I was strong, healthy, and in control, which are three things that we embed. And she says, no effect. I said, thanks, but I don't drink. And that's it. And that's where you want to be. So that's what we're doing. We're creating triggers that trigger the confidence, the absolute knowing that you're done with that there's no struggle. There is not a disease. You're not on the verge of relapse.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been a difficult, it's a big part of our harm reduction philosophies, keeping people on replacement therapies, because, and I heard a speaker one time at a convention, say exactly that, like that. She opened up her speech with basically, you want to know the secret to, relapse prevention. Never stop drinking. And it was kind of like, where's she going with this? You know what I mean? Like that has become a problem, that as soon as somebody becomes abstinent, there's this fear that now I'm just living my whole life trying to avoid this inevitable relapse that's going to happen. And I disagree with that being, someone in recovery, or do you know what I mean? Like, I think in the beginning we have to be very wary of like you say, triggers and where to go, and maybe people who didn't discover the fashion of hypnotherapy, that maybe stay out of the liquor store for a little while, like avoid that, but not to live 20 years from now in that same state of mind. Then we're doing something wrong here, right? So you're saying that this is accessed immediately. Now, does this work for every type of person? Like, what's the assessment that this is someone that's going to benefit from this versus, this is someone that this clearly is not going to be able to absorb that type of therapy.
Yeah. What I've learned over doing this for so many years, whether it's in person with a client or they're using my program at home, is that they have failed so many times, and it just breaks my heart to listen to their stories of how much they've failed and how much they believe that they aren't going to be able to do it and nothing's going to work. But even with that belief, because of the methodology now, that belief changes and we create an entirely new belief system. But I've got to de-hypnotize them from the 12-step stuff. And that's, I know there's a lot of people who are very, very serious about 12-step, but it has a 3 to 5% success rate. And that's not even really tracked, but that's in, some small studies. So that success rate is less than just, not doing anything, not getting any help. So are they hypnotizing you to fail, to expect to fail? And most people think nothing's going to work. And of course they think that because they've been to rehab. My son went to 5 rehabs. And all the while I was learning every time. One of them, it was a really big one in Southern California that was $30,000, and I had just written them a check 2 days earlier for $30,000. So the director says, I need to meet with you. Would you come in and meet with me? And I did. He said, I hear you're a hypnotherapist and you're working with addiction. And I said, yeah, that's what I do. And he said, well, our success rate's really low. It's only about 3 or 4%. And he knows that. And he had taken $33,000 from me a couple days earlier and from everyone else who's hoping that now something will work. He knows that. He said, we want to increase our success rate. Can you help us? So I just did one short session with a group of about 20 of the people there. And it was a session of taking them into their future, 1 year in the future and blah, 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 blah. And it was like a half hour of doing this. And then the next day he called me back into the office and he said, oh my gosh, what did you do? They're all so happy. They feel so good. They're loving this. I was like, yeah, well, just wait, we can do a lot more. So anyway, I did a presentation for the whole board of directors, and the psychiatrist said, no way, no, not happening. We don't like her song and dance.
Right. There's the conflict. Psychiatry.
Everyone else is on board, and it would have been such a great gift to give to these people that they're working with, but the psychiatrist was no. The psychiatrist, you got to have a lot of clout to be in that accepted group of practitioners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think the medical world will ever, it's kind of like the chiropractor and the physician, the chiropractors never really looked at. I think nowadays it's changed a bit, but like I know there's been that fight. I mean, you go online and you see, especially if you research chiropractors, you see the history, you're like, whoa. So would you say this is kind of the same fight where, holistic, is this considered holistic?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, you could, because holistic's just a word that means that you're taking, everything into account rather than just treating a condition.
Right.
You're looking at everything. It is by some doctors, they are totally on board. I used to have a lot of doctors that sent their patients to me, and they did because they understood there's an underlying cause. One of the doctors I used to go to was also an NLP practitioner. And what he did when he was seeing you in his office is he would implant suggestions just in conversation to help you to get better and help you to overcome whatever, illness and problems you're having. So there's some that are getting on board. And now it's a more respected profession than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And we have so much research, the universities that do tons of research about hypnotherapy and really valid research that we can cite.
Right.
So
Go
if I'm going to start a hypnotherapy, so I'm at home and I'm watching, and I'm like, okay, so I'm going to take a look at this and so forth. So what am I going to expect? I'm sure every hypnotherapist is different, but a general consensus is an assessment and then a session and you're good to go. Is it, an assessment and sessions forever? What am I planning?
Depends on what your issue is. There's some things that we can do with one session. There's some things you can overcome with a recorded session, but there are a lot of poorly trained hypnotherapists out there. And everybody has to know this, that if you try someone's recorded session you found on YouTube and it's like, oh my God, that didn't work. Now I feel really weird. People are untrained. And it's really sad. You can get a certificate for, $50. It says you're a hypnotherapist. So you want to be kind of careful. What you would expect from doing, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 sessions with a really well-trained hypnotherapist, we're not just going to do direct suggestion and say, okay, on the count of 5, you're going to be over your problems. We're going to look at what is the deeper cause. Is there a positive intention behind your issue? Something that is locked in from maybe even childhood. We're going to take you into these events in your past that contribute to it. Like if someone is really overweight and they just have an obsession for sugar, like this woman said, I bake cakes every week. I bake a cake. I live alone. There's no one else to eat them. I don't know why I do that. And I said, go back to the time when there was something important about baking a cake, a time in your life when there was something that was really, really important. So she goes back to being 12 years old and goes through a memory of her baking a cake for her family. And everybody's so proud of her and so happy. And it was, oh, she said, I feel so loved. Oh, they love me so much. So here she's associating this cake with love. And then we release that and we change it. And then she didn't have to bake cakes and eat them, but she didn't know why she was obsessed with doing that. So that would be an example of how people have locked in memories and what you get from actual good hypnotherapy.
And that's, it sounds very much like, certain forms of like, psychotherapies or EMDR, where you're sort of led or guided. And I guess this, was a question before is what is the difference of that hypnotic state of mind? I guess my question would be, is it the fact that you're unaware, or that, what I mean, that changes are occurring or these thoughts are being implanted unconsciously versus, forcing yourself to go through these memories just with your eyes closed in a very conscious way? What's the outcome is the same. I guess what's happening during hypnosis that's not happening.
Right. Yeah. So when your conscious mind is trying to come up with answers or solutions, if I asked you, okay, what happened in your past that made you want to drink and that you can't stop? Your conscious mind can't solve that because it doesn't have access to those memories that are kind of buried. So a woman that I asked her to go back to a time where alcohol was really, really important to her, that it had a real significance. And believe it or not, she goes back to being a 2-year-old baby who's in her mother's arms. Now, this is not that this memory is coming from her 2-year-old self, but it's coming from her adult self, looking at it and experiencing it as that baby. And she says, I feel fine. I'm happy. My mom's holding me, and says, oh, now my mom just put me down on the floor. And I said, what else is happening? She says, she walked away. And I said, what else do you notice? She says, oh, I can hear it. There's ice cubes in a glass. Well, her baby self doesn't know this, but her adult self can describe it. So she's getting that memory not to be locked in there. Mom comes back. She says, she picked me up and she's holding me now and I feel good. I said, what else do you notice? She says, oh, the smell. That glass has alcohol in it. It has whiskey in it. And I can hear that. Oh, and now she's feeling loved and safe. She's not crying anymore, but she's smelling that. Her adult self was able to bring the details of that memory. So hopefully this sort of answers your question of how different it is. She wouldn't have access to uncovering something like that. So now I ask her inner mind.
Not on demand. And
Right. Right.
like
And it was triggering her. It was keeping her drinking. So she
Right.
couldn't quit because that equaled love, the smell, the sound, the taste. So then we release that. We don't make her forget it. We just release the attachment to it and have her adult self know that that was something that happened and you don't need that anymore. And would your subconscious agree that it's okay to totally release that connection? And what you do love about yourself and your life is how healthy and strong and in control and how free you are from alcohol, for instance. There's a little more to it, but this is an example of how we unhook those early events. We don't talk about them. We don't try to analyze them. We get in there and actually release the connection.
Right. I mean, because I think our conscious mind has created all these allowances and justifications and excuses to protect or deny, the subconscious stuff. That is our therapy. That is our solution when it comes to things that have happened in our past and whatnot. I'm just getting a lot of feedback, Giuseppe. I don't know if it's in your room or whatever. There's a bit of chatting coming through.
Yeah, I'm hearing another voice too.
Okay.
Oh, there.
Perfect.
Very good.
I have a question. I don't want to be the pessimist, but I
Go for it.
you must have asked this yourself, Wendy. Your son's dealing with addiction. You're seeking, treatment. You do anything, like all the moms I've ever talked to. Why couldn't you hypnotize him? Why couldn't you apply your therapy? Was there too much transference? Is it just something that's the line for all therapists? They can't treat their own family members, or was it? And another question is, can anybody be hypnotized?
Almost anybody. There's some really analytical people that are just too guarded, and you have to use some really nice techniques to help them get past that feeling of being guarded. But yeah, about my son. So he's the one who helped me know what's actually going on in these rehabs. And I learned it from him. He is a genius. He is 6'5", gorgeous, and he knew what was up. And he kept saying, "Mom, they can't do this and expect us to get better." He didn't want me to work with him because it's a sensitive subject to do therapy with your mom. And he's got, he has issues with his mom, as I have issues with him. There's a whole bunch of horrible things that happen with a kid who's an addict. Bailing you out of
Whether
jail.
it's true or not. Yeah.
All my own anger and everything for what's happened. So he did come and speak to some of my therapist groups when people who were taking training from me, and he would go and speak to them for like an hour and tell them, here's what it's like to be an addict. This is the truth. This is how. So yeah, it isn't something that I was able to do for him. However, he was aware of, what I do for sure. He died of an overdose, and he had been to about 5 rehabs, and he was on his way to another one because he just didn't know what else to do. And this is a really difficult thing for me because here I've helped so many people all over the world, and I couldn't help him. So he was on his way up there, and he was in Denver. He was taking a bus up to the Montana place, and in Denver, a lot of people who do heroin, there's just a one more time thing, just once more.
Yep.
He did. But on a spiritual level, he came into my life. He chose me, let's say, to give me this information, and knowing that I am someone who can do something with this information. And I'm just eternally grateful. I'm, horribly sad that he died. But if this is on a higher level, what was to happen, it happened in the way it needed to. And so I just honor the experience and hold that in my heart. Yeah, it sucks.
Condolences to you. I mean, both Giuseppe and I have, close relations to people that have just had one more, and the devastation. And I mean, this has been, and you're a mom, and you're, a therapist in treating addictions. This is what so many of us feel, and so many of our viewers have felt. And where things didn't work, certain modalities didn't work. And I've heard moms say that I wish my son would have found like a safe supply or an opiate replacement therapy, because he would still be alive. And then that being said, that's not giving in to the possibility of what abstinent recovery, like someone you've describing that is transcended their addiction and their desires and their potential for relapse, and they're living the best life. Like, where can I ask you as a mom, where do you stand with that? As far as having lost him too soon, can you see, or would you have wanted him to have found anything else and still be alive to maybe make it to another option or another?
Yeah, absolutely. I would want him to live his life with whatever purpose he's here to live. And he, like I say, he's brilliant. I mean, and I use present tense because he still is, because what he's given to the world is still presently here, and his brilliance is still alive. And definitely, I would want him to still be here and experience what a gift he is, and so smart, and people love him. And the memories of him. They just had another memorial for him, his friends, just because they wanted to have another memorial, and because he's touched a lot of lives. So yeah, it is a tough one, but I also am glad that I can have some acceptance by knowing that his gift has helped a lot of people in this world that were hopeless, people who know that nothing's going to work. And this is one of the difficulties with him. He came to believe that nothing's going to work. He keeps trying, but knowing that he's failed and failed and failed, and all the things you're learning in AA and rehab, that nothing's going to work. He said, Mom, how can they keep doing the same thing and knowing it doesn't work? And most people don't understand the scammy part of rehab, what goes on in a lot of these rehab centers. And it's just, come on, spend 28 days, give us the money and go on to the next one. But even a son of a mom that I worked with, he was about 20 years old, and she brought him to me, and I spent 4 days, like 4 hours every day for 4 days with him. And he was very hopeless. So was mom. She'd done all the kind of things that I had. Oh man, after 4 days, I was just in love with this guy. He had tattoos of serial killers on his arms, faces of serial killers. This is the kind of person he was. He rode the rails. He was, oh my God. Ugh. So after 4 days, I just loved him because we were embracing his inner child and healing so many things from his past and getting back to who he really was. And his mom would stay in touch with me afterwards and says, oh my God, I get to hug my son and I got him back. He's actually my son. And she's so happy to have a relationship with him. So this is very different from him just quitting heroin. She's actually says, I've got him back. Unfortunately, about a year later, he overdosed, and she called me and told me, she says, but it's okay. I had a year with my son that was very real. It's the best in his entire life. And that gift was worth all of that, just having a year of my real son. So that kind of, that's kind of answering your question of how we feel when we do lose someone. In her case, she was totally like, yep. And she could accept, the death and the tragedy of that a little better.
Yeah. I mean, the experience is, like so many, you mentioned, not so straight up legitimate treatment centers. So many times going through these treatment centers, 30 days, 60 days, and having no other conclusion other than this doesn't work. Nothing to do with me. What they're bringing to the table, it isn't working. And the desperation you described, right? Like, just, I'll go anywhere. Did that focus you into sort of just the first thing on Google, or the first place that you heard of, like, or were you able to do research, and have you done research since then to find the places that do have the heart and do work with people in ways above a 3% success rate, and aren't taking people's money with some glorified version of the cure?
Right, yeah. And they all do have promises. And I found out from the very first time when I researched rehabs and found one in Southern California, the man who was on the phone with me that was selling me on this thing and setting everything up, when I flew my son down there and I went there and I said, "Oh, where's Dylan? I wanted to thank him." He said, "Who?" "Dylan. He's the one I talked to on the phone, that he works here, right?" And I said, "No, we don't have anybody by that name." "Well, they're brokers. There are all these brokers that are going to send you to any rehabs. They get their commission. They don't know anything about it. They just, set it up and take the phone calls." There's a man who went through what I did with his son, and he wrote a book about it. He has a rehab center in Malibu, and it's a very big, beautiful, high-end center. It's called Passages.
Lots
He
down there.
has 12 hypnotherapists there. And he also feeds them really high-level nutrition. They get the supplements they need. They have their yoga, all their mindful stuff, everything. It's $100,000. His success rate is very high because he does all of these things. His hypnotherapists on their own, several of them came to me for training. They said, "Well, we don't have any training in this. We work there, but we got to get some training." So he was doing well. And Passages, he's opening another one. But yeah, gosh, $100,000. Woo.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Yeah, that doesn't give just anybody a shot at the best
Yeah.
treatment.
But that's what he figured out from going through the same thing that I did, documenting this all in his book. And it's just down the same path of having to discover in a very expensive way that this rehab industry is horribly flawed.
Well, I mean, it's been in my experience. I mean, to invoke change in anybody that obviously needs it in their life, whether it's to quit something or to change, historic patterns of behavior, there's a requirement of their attention and willingness and desire for that. I mean, it's hard to work with someone who's, well, I can't and I won't, and this is just the way I am. Is that also true for hypnotherapy, in the sense of, you get somebody that doesn't believe in it, that doesn't want to necessarily want to change, they're just in there to appease their mom and dad or boss or whatever? Is it something that would benefit after having gone through a detoxification process and maybe some time clean, or will you basically say, I can make somebody quit right now, and no matter what attitude?
Yeah, it's really awesome questions. Everyone listening, you really understand what he's saying and how important it is to get onto the other side of that whole belief thing that nothing's going to work, that I can't do it, and why would I try again? As hypnotherapists, we have the ability to get people to the point where they do want that. Now, it's really hard to want to not be an alcoholic, because you like drinking for whatever it does for you, whatever problems it takes away, or your heroin or your meth or whatever. It's really hard to find a reason not to do it, because it makes you feel better than the shitty way you feel the rest of the time when you're thinking, I've got to quit, I've got to quit. Our job now is to create the desire, which is one of the words you used, so that it is an overwhelming desire that you want to feel that. And now it isn't an overwhelming desire to quit drinking or quit drugs. It's an overwhelming desire to have the life that we have you experience. Let's say I take you into a month in the future only on your first session, And in that month in the future, notice what's happening in your body. Notice how clear-headed you are and what it feels like. And even imagine right now, you look in the mirror and when you see yourself, you feel proud. And isn't that a feeling that you love and that you want more of? And then take you 6 months in the future and have you, maybe you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or you've repaired your family life, and have you want that, and all the things that you want in life. So if you want that, now we have something way bigger than I want to quit drinking or I need to quit drinking. Everybody hates me. I'm such a stupid person. Why can't I do this? And every time you try to quit your drug or your alcohol, you're accessing all these negative, horrible judgments and failures of the past. So when we change that, and if you do it really well as a hypnotherapist, the person wants that. And we don't call it like, being sober or being an alcoholic or overcoming alcoholism. We put something in there that's called strong, healthy, and in control. Each one of those things is embedded in these future memories. So, no, okay, look at this. You can drive by your old bar. Imagine that. You're driving by it and all you feel is strong and healthy and in control. And oh gosh, and then with traditional rehab, they say you can't be around people who drink and you can't associate with them. But yet this woman says, my husband used your program, and now when our friends come over for dinner, he's the one pouring the wine and making drinks for them because it makes him feel good that he doesn't drink.
Mhm.
It's so ridiculous that it has this profound effect. And even Sonny, the very first client I had with the meth, and I thought, oh gosh, how on earth do I, help him quit meth and be, strong and healthy and in control? And we did. And, for him to come back 6 months later just to say, hey, you know what, got my family back, my kids, life's good, I'm solid, I've got this. It's really something to experience. So the answer is yes, we can create a desire to what we do want, make it so overwhelmingly powerful that you want it above anything else. And something interesting, when I started doing this work, I drank wine every day. I'd come home from work and I drank wine every day when I'd come home. And then a couple months after I'd started doing the addiction work, I'd opened this cupboard above the fridge and I said, there's bottles of wine up there. What? I forgot to drink. I just didn't. Isn't that weird?
Hypnotize yourself.
Yeah.
And I was, what's that doing up there? But kind of
Well,
like Kenny, who had a case of beer in his fridge and he didn't even really see it or think about it. And he's still an Iron Man, even though he said, all I was is a fat slob drunk. That's what he believed about himself. And those were the words that created the state of mind that nothing is going to help him.
That's
Well, in the States, there definitely needs to be some solutions to the whole accessing services for mental health and addiction, here in Canada as well. It's unfortunate that it's a two-tiered healthcare system. I mean, there's one way to fix it. I always use the scenario, if you break your knee, there's one way to fix it, really. And so there aren't these opinions on how to fix your knee or sprained ankle. It's like, here's the intervention. And we can't do that with mental health and addiction because there are so many pathways and so many unique situations and all that to help individuals. So this is another pathway to recovery. I believe keep all options open because you never know which one's actually going to work. I like something we talk a lot about here is, somebody asked us, in a media interview, do you think those pictures of crystal meth faces are scaring people work? And I'm like, well, it might work for somebody. I don't know. Like it's not the only line of defense, but yes, some people don't do crystal meth because they don't want to do it because they saw those pictures, and others are like, hey, that looks like a really good picture, I'm going to do crystal meth. There's no logical reason. Like me, you tell me don't touch, I touch. Others don't touch. And why that happens is, if you can figure that out, I think you're going to figure out the philosophy of life and where we all come from. So I don't think we're there yet. I really appreciate your work. My condolences. And it's just sad that we have so many people that we're losing and so forth. And
Yeah.
I've always been intrigued by hypnotherapy. So if somebody wants to find a hypnotherapist, whether they're in Canada or the US, because we do reach both countries, is there an association? Is there, because I'm afraid if you Google it, who knows what's going to come up, right? So what can somebody do to make sure they end up, and on top of that, do you do virtual work? So how do people find you, hypnotherapist, virtual, all that stuff?
Yeah, so finding a hypnotherapist, if someone who's well trained, you just don't know until you really start talking to them and then understanding where they're coming from, how well trained they are. Are they one of the experts? If you're going to talk to them about addiction, be very, very careful, because they can make things worse if they don't know what they're doing. So I have trained hypnotherapists all over the world, and I do have some that I can refer you to. Or you can work virtually, and I have like people that I work with every day on Zoom, and we do about 30 minutes one-on-one, and then I tell them, okay, listen to this session, the recorded session on whatever it is we're looking at, like finding the positive intention or something. And then the next day they tell me what happened in their session and what that positive intention was. So we're building on that. But that's how I work right now. I also work with groups, and I have done this for groups of 20, 30, 40 people, 4 days. That's it. They come to me and we spend 4 days together, and the results are pretty stunning in 4 days, and follow up online as a group. So yeah, just be really careful when you're looking for a hypnotherapist. Make sure they're not someone who got a certificate from a website for $20, which exists. Oh my God, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Do your homework.
Well, thanks for being on our show. Really appreciate it. And you're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio 100.5 FM, or you're watching us live on our restream or on Facebook or YouTube or wherever. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We're here every Thursday. Darren, always good to see you.
Always good to see you. And
Yes.
Again, thank you to Wendy Friesen. Check it
Wendy,
out.
what's your website, Wendy?
It's wendy.com, and it's wendi.com. So if you spell it wrong, you probably get porn or something. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, just spell it with an I. And yeah, I'm happy to help. Send me an email. I do free consultations. I am very, very generous about helping people with addiction issues, and I look forward to helping many, many more.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you very
awesome.
much for joining us on
Thank
Talk
you
Recovery
guys.
today.
Great to meet you both.
Nice to meet you too. Take care, everybody. See you next Thursday. Bye.
Bye.